and consequently, I know that I have an image of a red house. But many features of my image I don't have such control over, or don't choose to exercise such control over, and such as its overall level of detail, the stability of its coloration, its flatness or depth, its similarity to visual experience. And about these things, my introspective judgments are much more tenuous and doubtful. Our knowledge about our own experience is also good when we can lean upon our knowledge of the outside world to prop it up. I know the following non-experiential fact. I'm looking directly at a red thing. I also know enough about vision in general to know that this sort of stimulus tends to produce reddish experiences. Now, such background knowledge ordinarily contributes to and helps support my judgments about particular instances of current conscious experience. Or, here's another case. I know my wife just said something insulting. This helps support my sense that the rising arousal that I'm feeling is anger. But if you ask me about aspects of my sensory or emotional or other experience that aren't in this way easily buttressed by my knowledge of the outside world, then I tend to stumble or feel uncertainty. Consider not what objects or properties are experienced by me as out there, but rather how I'm experiencing those objects and properties, with how much clarity, with what features of visual perspective, with how much stability in the visual field. Consider not what emotional attribution makes sense given how I've been treated and given how I'm acting, but rather how that emotion is felt. Where is it felt? How bodily is it? What is its rough phenomenal structure? On questions like that, I struggle and err. The third kind of experiential feature about which we have good self-knowledge, I'd speculate, are features about which it's important to our survival or functioning that we get it right. It's important that we be right about the approximate location of our pains so we can avoid or repair tissue damage. It's important that we be right about the presence or absence of hunger and thirst. It's important that we know what objects and properties we're perceiving and in what sensory modality. But again, probing even the gross morphology of the phenomenal character, if it takes us away from what is practically useful to know, leads us to dubious territory. We have no particular accuracy in our judgments about the precise character of our pain, stabbing, shooting, dull, or its precise location, as you'll know if you've ever tried to locate a toothache for a dentist. The phenomenal character of our hunger and thirst. Really, anything about them besides their very presence or absence, we're not especially prone to make accurate judgments about, I suspect. Maybe under this head, too, should go the sense we have of the general gist of our thoughts, including those in the very recent past over which we have no control. Presumably, recovering the general gist of a few seconds of recent thought is useful in regulating and maintaining coherent streams of thought. But again, as with hunger, thirst, and emotion, we're not so good about even the grossest morphology. For example, whether the thought was in inner speech or not, or whether it had an experiential, subjective location. Such judgments as those, I suspect, tend to run hostage to our theories and preconceptions. So I'd suggest that there's only a limited range of cases in which we have good self-knowledge about our stream of experience. Cases in which we can make our self-attributions true. Cases in which we can lean on our better knowledge of the outside world. And cases in which there are strong, directly practical reasons to know about some aspect of our phenomenal character. As for the rest, we tend to just make crap up and fly by the seat of our pants. All right, let's do attitudes. For some of our attitudes, I'm inclined toward a version of what sometimes gets called a transparency view. Maybe Alex Byrne will talk about this a bit tomorrow. The rough idea here is that if someone tells me something like, asks me something like, do you believe it will rain tomorrow? I think about whether it will rain. That is, despite the fact that the question is about what I believe, in answering it, I don't think about what I believe. I think about external affairs, about whether it will rain or not. And then I express my judgment about those external affairs using, if it suits me, either self-attributive language. Of course I don't think it will rain, or objective language. Of course it won't rain. With the difference between those two, grounded more in conversational pragmatics than in the presence or absence of an introspective act. This expressive procedure delivers accurate self-attributions if there's the right kind of hookup between my judgment, it won't rain, and my self-attributive expression of that judgment, I don't think it will rain. This sort of procedure works fine, I think, for fairly trivial attitudes, or attitudes that connect fairly narrowly to our actions. Attitudes like my preference for vanilla ice cream over chocolate when I'm asked on a particular occasion, or my general belief that it doesn't rain much in California in April. The vanilla preference and the rain belief don't hook up much with my broad values or my self-conception, and their connections to my behavior are pretty limited. In the evening's ice cream consumption, my springtime habits in picnic planning and umbrella carrying. But those aren't the attitudes that I care about most. Or at least they're not the ones that are most central to my self-knowledge in the morally loaded sense of self-knowledge. In the sense of the Delphic Oracle's recommendation to know thyself. The Oracle was presumably not concerned about whether people knew their attitudes toward the April weather. To the extent the injunction to know oneself pertains to knowledge of attitudes, it must be attitudes like your central values, your general background assumptions, your broad cognitive takes on the world. And about matters like that, I believe, our self-knowledge is rather poor. So let's start with sexism. Many men in academia sincerely profess that women are equally intelligent. Ralph, a philosophy professor, let's assume, is one such man. He's prepared to argue coherently, authentically, vehemently for equality of intelligence, and he's argued the point repeatedly in the past. And yet Ralph is systematically sexist in his spontaneous reactions, judgments, and unguarded behavior. When he gazes out on class on the first day, it seems to him that some of the students look bright. But it never seems to him that the women are the ones who look bright. When a woman makes an insightful comment or submits an excellent essay, he feels more surprise than he would were a man to do so, even though his female students make insightful comments and submit excellent essays at the same rate as his male students. When Ralph's on the hiring committee for a new office manager, it won't seem to him that the women are the most intellectually capable, even if they are. Or if he does become convinced of the intelligence of a female applicant, it will have taken more evidence than if the applicant had been male, and so on. Now, Ralph may know this about himself, or he may not. I don't see any reason to think he has any special authority about such matters compared to other people who have observed his relevant behavior. In fact, he may be disadvantaged by a desire not to see himself as sexist, or by the more general desire to see himself as someone whose actions reflect his espoused principles. Now you